Hey guys, tonight we're going to explore the hard life of a medieval servant, a quiet journey into the daily life of the people who worked behind the scenes in medieval castles and manor houses. But before we begin, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy relaxing history stories like this. And if you feel like sharing, tell me in the comments which city you're watching this video from right now. It's always fascinating to see where listeners from around the world are joining these quiet historical journeys. Now dim the lights, get comfortable, maybe pull up a blanket, and let's slowly step back into the quiet and hard-working world of medieval servants. The castle is still quiet long before the sun rises. Outside the tall stone walls, the countryside sleeps beneath a cold and silent sky. A thin layer of mist drifts slowly across the open fields and winding dirt roads that lead toward the castle gates. Inside the castle walls, almost everyone is still asleep. The great hall stands empty and dark. Long wooden tables that were filled with noise and laughter the night before now sit quietly in the darkness. The large fireplace at the end of the hall holds only faint red embers left from the previous evening's fire. Most of the noble residents of the castle are still resting comfortably in their chambers. Thick wooden doors remain closed. Heavy curtains cover the narrow windows that let in the first pale light of morning. But deep below the grand rooms and decorated halls, another part of the castle is beginning to wake. This is the servants' quarters. The rooms here are small and simple. Stone walls surround narrow spaces where many servants sleep together on rough straw mattresses. The air here is always a little colder than in the upper floors of the castle. Even during warmer seasons, the thick stone walls seem to hold onto a quiet chill. In winter, the cold can feel even sharper. One of the servants slowly opens his eyes. Perhaps his name is Thomas, or maybe William. Names like these were very common among ordinary people in the medieval world. Thomas pushes aside his thin blanket and sits up slowly on his straw mattress. The mattress rustles quietly as the dry straw inside shifts under his weight. Around him, several other servants are still asleep. Soft breathing fills the small room. A few faint snores echo gently against the stone walls. But Thomas knows it is time to begin the day. Medieval servants often wake long before the sun rises. There are no clocks or alarms to wake them. Instead, they learn to wake by habit. Years of the same routine teach their bodies when the day must begin. Thomas stretches his arms and rubs the sleep from his eyes. Another servant nearby slowly begins to stir as well. Soon several people in the room are quietly preparing to start their morning work. The servants dress quickly in simple wool clothing. Their clothes are practical rather than comfortable. The fabric is rough but warm enough for long hours of work. Unlike the fine silks and decorated garments worn by nobles, servant clothing is plain and durable. Most garments are worn for many years before they are replaced. Thomas pulls on his boots and quietly stands. The stone floor beneath his feet feels cold even through the thick soles. He walks carefully through the dim hallway outside the sleeping room. The corridor is narrow and lit only by the faint glow of a dying torch fixed to the wall. The smell of smoke and old wood lingers in the air. Somewhere far above, a door creaks open. Perhaps a guard is changing shifts on the castle walls, or maybe another servant has already begun their work. The castle is slowly waking, but the servants must be ready before anyone else begins their day. Thomas walks toward the kitchen area deep within the castle. The kitchen is one of the busiest rooms in the entire building. Later in the day it will be full of noise and movement. Cooks will prepare meals. Servants will carry water, chop vegetables, and move large pots over the fire. But right now, the kitchen is silent. The large hearth stands dark and empty. Ash from last night's fire rests quietly in the centre of the stone fireplace. Thomas kneels beside the hearth. Lighting the morning fire is one of the first tasks of the day. Without the fire, the kitchen cannot begin preparing food. He gathers small pieces of wood stacked nearby. Carefully he arranges them into a small pile. Then he adds dry straw and a few thin twigs. Using a piece of flint and steel, he strikes a spark. For a moment, nothing happens. Then a small thread of smoke curls gently upward. A tiny flame appears. Thomas watches patiently as the fire slowly grows stronger. Soon the warmth begins to spread across the kitchen floor. This fire will cook breakfast for dozens of people. Knights, nobles, guards, cooks, and many other servants will all depend on the work that begins here before sunrise. Yet very few of them will ever see the quiet effort that started it. That is the nature of servant life in the medieval world. Their work happens quietly behind the scenes, before anyone else wakes, before the castle fills with noise and movement, before the long day truly begins, and as the small fire continues to grow brighter in the dark kitchen, another cold medieval morning slowly begins inside the castle walls. The small fire in the kitchen slowly begins to grow brighter. Soft orange light spreads across the dark stone walls of the castle kitchen. For a few quiet moments, Thomas is the only person awake in this large room. The gentle crackling of the fire becomes the first sound of the morning. Soon, however, the silence begins to fade. Another servant enters the kitchen doorway. Her name might be Margaret. She carries a wooden bucket filled with water drawn from the castle well. The bucket is heavy. Water must be carried many times each morning because the kitchen will need a large supply for cooking, cleaning, and preparing food. Margaret places the bucket beside the long wooden preparation table. She nods quietly to Thomas. Servants often begin their work early and speak very little in the first hours of the morning. Everyone understands their tasks without needing many words. Thomas adds another piece of wood to the fire. The flames grow stronger now. Soon the hearth will be hot enough for cooking. Margaret begins arranging clay bowls and wooden plates across the long table. These dishes will soon hold bread, porridge, and simple foods prepared for the castle residents. More servants slowly arrive. Footsteps echo softly in the hallway outside the kitchen. A young boy enters carrying a bundle of firewood. He sets it carefully beside the hearth. In the medieval world, many servants begin working at a very young age. Some children start helping in castles when they are only 10 or 12 years old. Their tasks are usually smaller at first, carrying wood, fetching water, cleaning floors. But over time they learn the many responsibilities required to keep the castle running. The castle kitchen begins to feel warmer now. The growing fire fills the room with gentle heat. Smoke rises slowly upward toward the large stone chimney above the hearth. Thomas steps back and watches the flames for a moment. Lighting and maintaining fires is one of the most important tasks inside a medieval castle. Without fire there is no cooking, no warmth, no light during the long winter evenings. In many ways, the entire castle depends on the quiet work of servants who manage these fires every day. Margaret begins preparing a large iron pot. She fills it with water from the wooden bucket. Soon this pot will hold oats and grains to make morning porridge. Porridge is one of the most common meals in medieval households. It is simple to make, it is filling, and it can feed many people at once. As the kitchen becomes busier, the sounds of the castle slowly begin to grow. Somewhere above, a door opens loudly. A pair of guards walks through the great hall. Their boots echo across the stone floor. The night watch is ending. Morning guards are taking their place along the castle walls. Back in the kitchen, another servant begins slicing large loaves of bread. The bread is coarse and dense. Medieval bread is often made from barley or rye rather than the soft wheat bread many people eat today. It is darker in colour and heavier in texture, but it is strong enough to last several days without spoiling. Bread is one of the most important foods in the medieval world. Many people eat it with nearly every meal. Servants, soldiers, and peasants rely on bread to provide the energy they need for long days of work. Thomas walks toward a wooden shelf filled with clay cups. He begins arranging them neatly along the preparation table. Soon the kitchen will need to serve drinks as well. Most people in the castle will drink small amounts of ale in the morning. Ale is safer than plain water in many places during the medieval period. Because it is boiled during brewing, it often contains fewer harmful impurities than untreated water. The kitchen now hums with quiet activity. Servants move steadily around the room. Some prepare vegetables. Others carry supplies from storage rooms beneath the castle. Large sacks of grain are stacked along the walls. Bundles of dried herbs hang from wooden beams overhead. The smell of smoke, bread, and warm grain slowly fills the air. Despite the growing noise, the work remains calm and organised. Every servant understands their role. These routines have been repeated day after day for many years. Outside the kitchen windows, the sky begins to lighten. A faint grey glow spreads across the horizon. Morning is finally beginning to arrive. Inside the castle, however, the servants have already been working for quite some time. Thomas wipes his hands on a cloth and checks the fire again. The flames now burn steadily beneath the iron cooking pots. Margaret stirs the large pot of porridge slowly with a wooden spoon. Steam rises gently from the surface. Soon the first meal of the day will be ready. This breakfast will feed not only the noble family, but also the many workers who keep the castle functioning. Knights, guards, messengers, cooks, and of course the servants themselves. Though their meals are often simpler, servants still need strength to complete the long list of tasks waiting ahead. For medieval servants, the day is only just beginning. After breakfast is served, there will still be floors to sweep, chambers to clean, fires to maintain, water to carry, animals to feed, laundry to wash, and countless other duties that fill the long hours of the day. Yet despite the hard work, these routines also create a quiet rhythm inside the castle, a rhythm that repeats day after day, season after season, year after year, and as the first true light of morning finally touches the stone walls outside the castle, the servants continue their steady work, preparing the castle for another busy day in the medieval world. Morning light slowly begins to spread across the castle courtyard. The sky outside the tall stone walls turns from dark grey to a soft pale blue. Inside the castle kitchen, the warmth from the fire now fills most of the room. Steam rises from the large pot of porridge that Margaret has been stirring carefully. The thick mixture bubbles slowly as grains soften in the hot water. The smell of warm oats drifts gently through the kitchen air. For many people inside the castle, this simple porridge will be the first meal of the day. Thomas steps close to the hearth and adds another piece of firewood. The flames crackle softly as the wood begins to burn. Maintaining the fire is a constant task. If the flames grow too weak, the food will not cook properly. If the fire grows too strong, it could burn the meal or fill the kitchen with smoke. Medieval servants learn these skills through years of quiet practice. Across the kitchen, several other servants prepare bread for the morning meal. Large loaves sit on the wooden table waiting to be sliced. The crust is dark and firm. Inside, the bread is dense and heavy compared to the soft breads many people know today. A servant uses a long knife to cut thick pieces that will soon be carried to the great hall. Bread in the medieval world is more than just food. Sometimes it is also used as a kind of plate. Large pieces of bread called trenchers are placed on the table. Food is served on top of them. After the meal, the soaked bread might be eaten by servants or given to the poor. In this way, almost nothing goes to waste. The kitchen becomes busier as more servants arrive to begin their morning duties. Wooden bowls are arranged carefully along the preparation table. Clay cups are placed beside them. A young servant carries another bucket of water from the well. The castle well sits deep inside the courtyard. Drawing water requires strength and patience. The rope must be lowered carefully down the dark shaft. Then the heavy bucket must be lifted back to the surface. Servants repeat this task many times each day. Water is needed for cooking, washing, cleaning, and many other activities inside the castle. As the kitchen prepares the morning meal, other parts of the castle begin to wake as well. High above the kitchen in the upper chambers, the first noble residents slowly rise from their beds. Heavy curtains are pulled aside. Morning light enters the rooms through narrow windows. Servants assigned to the noble chambers quietly enter to help prepare the rooms for the day. Some bring warm water for washing. Others tidy the bed linens or sweep the floors. Life for nobles is very different from the life of the servants working below. While servants wake before sunrise to begin their tasks, nobles often rise later in the morning. Their days are filled with meetings, meals, hunting, or managing the lands around the castle. But even these activities depend on the work of servants who prepare everything in advance. Back in the kitchen, the porridge is finally ready. Margaret lifts the wooden spoon and checks the thick mixture. The grains are soft now. The steam rising from the pot carries a warm, comforting smell. Thomas begins filling wooden bowls with the porridge. Each bowl must be carried carefully to the Great Hall. The Great Hall is the largest room in the castle. It is where meals are served and where many gatherings take place. When the castle is busy, the hall can become loud with conversation and movement. But early in the morning it is still mostly quiet. A few servants walk through the hall, placing bowls and bread along the long tables. The large fireplace at the end of the hall is also being prepared. Another servant kneels to light a morning fire there as well. The hall is large and cold without the warmth of a fire. Thomas enters the great hall carrying a tray of bowls. His footsteps echo across the stone floor. The tall ceiling disappears into shadows high above. Long wooden tables stretch across the room from one end to the other. Large banners hang from the walls displaying the symbols of the noble family who lives in the castle. Soon the hall will fill with people beginning their day. But for a few moments Thomas pauses to look around the quiet room. It is one of the rare, peaceful moments during a servant's busy day. He places the bowls carefully on the table. Each place must be arranged neatly. Even simple meals require preparation and order. More servants arrive carrying bread and cups of ale. Small pitchers of ale are placed along the tables. In the medieval world, it is common to drink ale even in the morning. The drink is mild and provides some energy for the day ahead. Soon the first guards enter the hall. They have finished their long night watch along the castle walls. Their armour makes soft clinking sounds as they walk. They sit at one end of the table and begin eating quietly. For them, the warm porridge is a welcome comfort after hours spent in the cold night air. One by one, more people begin arriving. Messengers, servants, kitchen workers. The hall slowly fills with gentle conversation and the sound of wooden spoons touching bowls. The castle is fully awake now. For the servants, however, this is only the beginning of the day's work. After breakfast, the tasks will multiply. The floors of the hall must be cleaned, the tables must be cleared, new fires must be lit in many rooms across the castle, water must continue to be carried from the well, and above all the servants must remain ready for any request from the noble household. Yet despite the constant work, there is a steady rhythm to life inside the castle. Each morning follows a similar pattern. Wake before sunrise, prepare the fires, cook the meals, serve the household. Then begin the long list of duties that fill the day. Thomas collects several empty bowls from the table. He carries them back toward the kitchen. The sun now shines clearly through the high windows of the great hall. Golden light stretches across the stone floor. Another day has begun in the medieval castle, and for the many servants who keep this place running, the real work is only just getting started. The morning meal in the great hall slowly begins to come to an end. Wooden bowls grow empty as the last spoonfuls of porridge are eaten. The quiet sound of conversation fades as people finish their breakfast and prepare for the day ahead. For the nobles and knights of the castle, the morning may now turn toward meetings, travel, or hunting in the nearby forests. But for the servants, the busiest hours of the morning are only beginning. Thomas returns to the great hall carrying a large wooden tray. Several other servants follow behind him. Their task now is to clear the tables and clean the hall before the next activities of the day begin. He carefully gathers the empty bowls from the long wooden tables. The bowls clink softly as they are stacked together. Another servant collects the cups that once held ale. Small drops of the drink still sit at the bottom of the clay cups. Nothing in the castle stays dirty for long. Servants move steadily along the tables, wiping the wooden surfaces with cloths. Bits of bread and crumbs are brushed away. In a large castle, even simple cleaning can take a long time. The great hall alone is large enough to hold dozens of people. Its stone floor stretches from one end of the room to the other, beneath the tall wooden ceiling. Dust and small bits of dirt are always carried in from the courtyard, so sweeping the floor is another important morning task. One servant brings a large straw broom. Slowly he begins sweeping the stone floor in wide, careful strokes. The broom makes a soft scratching sound as it moves across the ground. Small piles of dust and crumbs gather near the doorway where they will soon be carried outside. Meanwhile, Thomas carries the stack of empty bowls back toward the kitchen. The hallway outside the great hall is now much brighter than it was earlier in the morning. Sunlight pours through the narrow windows along the corridor. The stone walls glow with warm golden light. As Thomas enters the kitchen, he finds the room just as busy as before. Margaret and several other servants are already washing dishes in large wooden tubs filled with water. The bowls from breakfast are placed into the water and scrubbed carefully. Soap in the medieval world is simple but effective. It is often made from animal fat and ash. The smell is strong, but it helps remove grease and food from the dishes. Once cleaned, the bowls are set aside to dry on wooden racks. These dishes will be used again later when the midday meal is prepared. Nothing in the castle is wasted. Everything must be cleaned and reused again and again. Another servant enters the kitchen carrying a basket filled with dirty cloths and napkins from the great hall. These will soon be taken to the washing area outside the castle. Laundry in the medieval world is a heavy and tiring job. Clothes and cloths must be scrubbed by hand in cold water. Sometimes they are beaten against stones to remove dirt. Then they are hung in the sun or near fires to dry. For the servants responsible for this work, it can take many hours. Thomas places the last stack of bowls near the washing tubs. Then he looks toward the doorway leading to the castle courtyard. A new task is waiting. He lifts an empty wooden bucket and walks outside. The castle courtyard is now alive with movement. Guards walk along the walls above. Stable workers lead horses from the stables toward the open yard. Messengers prepare to ride out through the castle gate carrying letters and news to nearby towns. In one corner of the courtyard stands the castle well. The well is deep and surrounded by a circular stone wall. A wooden beam stretches above it, holding the rope used to lower buckets into the darkness below. Thomas ties the bucket to the rope and begins lowering it slowly. The rope slides through his hands as the bucket disappears into the deep well. After a moment, a faint splash echoes from below. The bucket has reached the water. Now comes the harder part. Thomas pulls the rope upward again. The bucket is much heavier now, filled with cold water. Slowly and steadily he lifts it higher and higher until it reaches the surface. Water spills gently over the edges as he pulls the bucket onto the stone rim of the well. This water will soon be carried back into the castle. More dishes will need washing, floors will need cleaning, hands will need rinsing after long hours of work. Water is used everywhere inside the castle, and it must all be carried by servants. Thomas lifts the bucket carefully and begins walking back toward the kitchen. The sun has now risen high enough to warm parts of the courtyard. Birds fly across the sky above the castle towers. The peaceful morning air carries the distant sounds of the countryside beyond the walls. Yet inside the castle the servants continue their steady routine. Work never truly stops. As Thomas enters the kitchen again, he places the bucket beside the washing tubs. Margaret thanks him quietly before using the fresh water to continue cleaning the dishes. Around the room, other servants prepare for the next tasks of the day. Some will soon begin chopping vegetables for the midday meal. Others will carry supplies from the castle storage rooms. Sacks of grain must be moved. Barrels of ale must be checked. Firewood must be stacked near the hearth. Every hour of the day brings new work. Thomas wipes his hands on a cloth and glances toward the hallway. Soon he will be sent to another part of the castle, perhaps to sweep a noble chamber, perhaps to carry wood to a cold room upstairs, perhaps to help in the stables outside. Servants must always be ready for whatever task is needed next. Yet despite the endless work, there is a quiet rhythm to life here. Morning meals, cleaning halls, carrying water, preparing the next fire. These tasks repeat day after day within the castle walls, and as the sun continues to climb higher in the bright medieval sky, the servants move steadily from one duty to the next, keeping the castle running in ways that most people rarely notice. By the time the sun climbs higher above the castle walls, the servants are already deep into their next round of work. The morning meal has been cleared away, and the great hall now sits quiet once again. Only a faint smell of warm porridge and bread still lingers in the air. Thomas steps into the long stone corridor that leads toward the upper chambers of the castle. The hallway feels cooler here than in the kitchen. The warmth from the hearth does not easily reach these distant rooms. Tall, narrow windows line the corridor and thin beams of sunlight stretch across the stone floor. Dust floats slowly through the golden light. Thomas carries a simple wooden broom and a small cloth tucked into his belt. Cleaning the upper halls is another daily task for the servants. Though the nobles may not notice every detail, the castle must always appear orderly and respectable. He begins sweeping slowly along the corridor. The broom brushes softly across the stone. Small bits of dirt and straw gather into a thin line along the wall. Servants and visitors walk these hallways all day long. Mud from boots and dust from the courtyard are constantly carried inside. Without regular cleaning, the castle would quickly become unpleasant. As Thomas works, he hears footsteps approaching from the far end of the corridor. Another servant named Alice appears carrying a basket filled with fresh linens. The linens are clean cloths that will replace those used in the noble chambers. They have been washed carefully and dried earlier in the morning. Alice smiles politely as she passes. Servants inside the castle often work quietly side by side. There is rarely time for long conversations. Everyone has duties waiting. Thomas finishes sweeping the first section of the corridor. He gathers the small pile of dust and carries it toward a narrow window. With a careful motion, he brushes the dirt outside where the wind quickly carries it away. Next, he walks toward one of the noble chambers. These rooms are very different from the crowded servants' quarters below. The wooden door is heavy and carved with decorative patterns. Thomas knocks softly before entering. Inside the chamber the air is warmer. A small fireplace sits along one wall, and the last pieces of wood from the night before are still glowing faintly. Thick curtains hang beside the window. A large wooden bed stands in the centre of the room. Soft blankets and furs are spread across the mattress. Compared to the straw bedding used by servants, this bed looks extremely comfortable. But even noble rooms require cleaning each day. Thomas begins by opening the curtains. Sunlight pours into the chamber. The fresh light reveals small specks of dust resting on the wooden furniture. He shakes out the blankets gently to remove wrinkles. Then he smooths the sheets across the bed. In the medieval world, beds are valuable pieces of furniture. They are carefully maintained because replacing them would be expensive. Next, Thomas kneels beside the fireplace. The ashes from the night's fire must be removed before a new fire can be prepared later in the day. Using a small metal shovel, he gathers the grey ash into a bucket. Some of this ash will later be used to help make soap. Very little material inside the castle is wasted. When the hearth is clean, Thomas places a few small pieces of wood inside ready for the evening fire. During colder months, fireplaces are essential. Stone walls may look strong and impressive, but they also hold the cold air inside the building. Without regular fires, many rooms would feel uncomfortable. Thomas continues cleaning the chamber. He wipes the wooden table near the bed. A clay cup and small candle holder sit upon it. The candle has burned low, leaving a thin trail of melted wax down the side. He replaces the candle with a fresh one from his pouch. In the corner of the room stands a wooden chest. Inside it are the clothes and personal items of the noble who sleeps here. Servants rarely touch these belongings unless they are asked. Respecting the possessions of the household is very important. After finishing the room, Thomas steps quietly back into the corridor. More doors line the hallway. Each chamber requires the same careful attention. Sweeping floors, shaking blankets, cleaning hearths, opening windows when the weather allows. The routine continues room after room. Meanwhile, the castle grows louder as the day moves forward. From outside the courtyard comes the sound of horses moving near the stables. Blacksmiths begin their work shaping metal tools. The distant ringing of hammer against iron echoes faintly through the walls. Servants carrying baskets of laundry walk along the corridor below. Some head toward the outer yard where clothing will dry in the sun. Others carry folded cloths back to storage rooms. Life inside the castle is always busy. Even when the nobles spend their time in meetings or leisure activities, the servants continue their steady work. Thomas pauses for a moment beside one of the narrow windows. From here he can see the countryside stretching far beyond the castle walls. Green fields roll across the land. A small river winds quietly through the valley. Farmers in the distance guide their animals across the fields. These farms provide much of the food that keeps the castle supplied: grain, vegetables, milk, meat. Without the labour of farmers and servants alike, the castle could not function. After a brief moment, Thomas returns to his duties. Another chamber door opens before him. Another room waiting to be cleaned. Another fireplace waiting to be prepared. The pattern of work continues steadily through the late morning hours. Sweeping, cleaning, carrying small loads of wood, checking windows, replacing candles. These quiet tasks may seem simple, but they are essential to life inside the castle. Every clean floor and every warm fireplace depends on the careful effort of servants, and as the sun climbs higher over the tall towers of the castle, Thomas and the other servants continue their work without pause, keeping the halls and chambers ready for whatever the rest of the day may bring. By the late morning, the castle corridors have grown much busier than they were at sunrise. Servants move steadily from room to room, finishing their cleaning tasks. Knights and messengers walk through the halls carrying news or preparing for travel. The quiet castle of the early morning has now fully awakened. Thomas steps away from the upper corridor after finishing the last chamber on his list. A steward standing near the staircase gives him another task. The stables need help. Thomas nods quietly and begins walking down the wide stone staircase toward the courtyard. His footsteps echo softly against the curved walls of the stairwell. The air becomes warmer as he approaches the open courtyard doors. Sunlight pours through the archway leading outside. The moment he steps into the courtyard, the sounds of the castle surround him. Horses shift and stamp their hooves near the stables. Stable workers call to one another as they guide animals into their stalls. A few chickens wander across the yard searching for bits of grain. The courtyard smells of hay, wood smoke, and warm earth under the bright sun. Thomas walks toward the large wooden stable building along the castle wall. The stable doors stand open to let fresh air inside. Rows of wooden stalls line both sides of the long building. Several horses lift their heads as Thomas enters. Some of them belong to knights of the castle. Others are used for pulling carts or carrying messages across long distances. Horses are extremely valuable animals in the medieval world. They are strong, fast, and essential for travel. Because of this, the castle takes great care in maintaining them. Inside the stable, another servant named Robert is already working. He carries a pitchfork and is moving fresh straw into one of the stalls. The straw will become bedding for the horses. It helps keep the floor dry and comfortable. Robert greets Thomas with a quick nod. There is plenty of work to do. Thomas picks up a wooden bucket and walks toward the water trough. The trough must be filled several times each day so the horses can drink. He dips the bucket into a large barrel filled earlier from the well. Then he pours the water slowly into the trough. One of the horses steps forward immediately. The large animal lowers its head and begins drinking. Its dark mane shifts gently as it moves. Thomas pats the horse softly along its neck. Many servants become familiar with the animals they care for each day. Even though the work is tiring, Moments like this offer a quiet connection with the living creatures inside the castle. After filling the trough, Thomas begins helping Robert clean one of the stalls. Old straw must be removed and replaced with fresh bedding. Using a shovel, they gather the damp straw into a wheelbarrow. The barrow will later be taken outside the castle walls where the waste can be used in nearby fields. Nothing inside the castle truly goes to waste. Even animal bedding eventually becomes useful. As they work, sunlight filters through the wooden slats of the stable walls. Thin beams of light stretch across the dusty floor. Small particles float quietly in the warm air. The steady sounds of horses breathing and shifting fill the stable. Outside, the courtyard continues its daily activity. A blacksmith works near a small forge beside the wall. Each strike of his hammer against glowing metal sends a sharp ringing sound across the yard. He's repairing a horseshoe for one of the knights. Messengers prepare their saddles nearby. Soon they will ride out through the castle gates carrying letters to nearby towns and villages. Travel in the medieval world can take many hours or even days. Messages move slowly across the land. But the horses waiting in the stable make that travel possible. Thomas wipes his hands on his tunic after finishing the stall. Robert begins spreading fresh straw across the floor. The horse returns calmly to its clean resting place. Stable work may not seem as grand as the duties of a knights or nobles, yet without servants caring for the animals, the castle would quickly lose its ability to travel, transport supplies, or send messages. The work of servants supports every part of castle life. After a short time, the stable tasks begin to slow. Most of the stalls have been cleaned. The horses now stand quietly eating hay from their feeding racks. Thomas steps outside into the bright courtyard again. The sun is now high above the castle towers. Shadows grow shorter across the stone ground. A light breeze moves through the open yard, carrying the distant scent of fields beyond the walls. Servants continue moving through the courtyard, carrying baskets, tools, and bundles of wood. Everywhere there is quiet but steady motion. The steward calls to Thomas once more. It is nearly time to begin preparing for the midday meal. Soon the kitchen will need more hands again. Thomas nods and begins walking back toward the large kitchen doors. Another part of the day's work is about to begin. Inside the castle, the rhythm of servant life continues without pause. From the early morning fires to the work of the stables and the meals yet to come, the quiet effort of servants keeps the entire castle alive. And as Thomas steps back into the warm kitchen filled with the smell of cooking grains and vegetables, the next chapter of the day slowly begins. By the time Thomas returns to the castle kitchen, the midday preparations have already begun. The quiet kitchen of early morning has now become one of the busiest places in the castle. Several servants move quickly between tables carrying baskets of vegetables and sacks of grain. Large wooden cutting boards are covered with onions, carrots, and bundles of herbs gathered from nearby gardens. The smell of fresh food slowly fills the warm air. Margaret stands beside the large hearth once again. This time a much larger fire burns beneath several iron cooking pots. Flames flicker brightly and the heat spreads across the room. Cooking the midday meal requires far more preparation than the simple breakfast earlier in the day. More people will gather in the great hall, knights returning from morning duties, messengers who have not yet departed, servants who pause briefly from their work. Thomas walks toward the long preparation table. A basket of turnips waits beside a sharp knife. Without a word, he begins slicing the vegetables into thick pieces. The knife moves steadily against the wooden board. Each cut produces a soft, hollow sound. Around him, the kitchen continues its quiet rhythm. Another servant crushes garlic with a small stone tool. Someone else pours grain into a large pot where it will slowly cook into stew. Bundles of dried herbs hang from wooden beams above the tables. The herbs sway slightly each time the kitchen door opens. These herbs give flavour to the meals prepared inside the castle. Parsley, thyme, sage, simple plants that grow easily in the surrounding countryside. In the medieval world, spices from distant lands are very expensive. Only the richest households can afford them regularly. Most meals rely instead on herbs grown nearby. Thomas continues cutting vegetables while listening to the sounds around him. The bubbling of stew pots, the crackling of firewood, the soft murmur of servants speaking quietly as they work. From outside the kitchen windows he can hear the distant hammer of the blacksmith again. The steady rhythm of metal striking metal echoes faintly across the courtyard. Soon the steward enters the kitchen. He looks carefully at the preparations. His job is to make sure everything is ready before the midday meal begins. He nods with quiet approval. The servants continue working without pause. Thomas carries the sliced vegetables toward the large pot hanging above the fire. Margaret lifts the heavy lid. Steam rises into the air. He pours the vegetables into the bubbling stew. Immediately the smell grows richer and stronger. Meals inside the castle must feed many people at once. Large pots make it possible to cook enough food for dozens of hungry workers. Nearby, another servant slices dark bread into thick portions. The bread will be carried to the great hall soon. Once again, wooden trenchers are placed along the tables. The routine is familiar now. Breakfast, cleaning, stable work, and now the preparation of the midday meal. The pattern repeats every day within the castle walls. As the cooking continues, the kitchen becomes warmer and louder. More servants arrive to help. Some wash extra bowls. Others fill pitchers with ale from a wooden barrel in the corner. The ale is poured carefully into clay jugs. Soon these jugs will be carried to the great hall. Thomas wipes sweat from his forehead. Standing near the fire can become very hot. Even in cold seasons, the kitchen often feels warm because of the constant flames, but the warmth is welcome after the chilly stone corridors of the castle. Margaret tastes the stew with a wooden spoon. She nods slowly. The flavour is good. She adds a small pinch of salt. Salt is valuable and must be used carefully. It helps preserve food and also improves the taste of simple ingredients. Outside, the sky is bright and clear. Sunlight streams through the narrow windows of the kitchen. Dust particles drift through the light like tiny floating stars. After some time, the steward returns again. This time he announces that the meal should be served soon. Immediately, the servants begin arranging bowls across large wooden trays. Thomas lifts one of the heavy trays carefully. The bowls are filled with steaming stew. He walks slowly toward the great hall, trying not to spill the food. The hallway outside the kitchen feels cooler once again. His footsteps echo softly along the stone floor. As he enters the great hall, he sees that people have already begun gathering. Several knights sit along the long tables. A messenger leans against one bench while speaking quietly with a guard. The large hall is much brighter now than it was earlier in the morning. Sunlight pours through the tall windows. The banners hanging along the walls move slightly in the gentle breeze. Thomas sets the tray carefully on the table. Other servants arrive behind him, carrying bread and jugs of ale. Soon the midday meal is ready. The people inside the hall begin eating. Wooden spoons dip into bowls of stew. The smell of herbs and vegetables fills the air. Voices rise slightly as conversations begin. For many workers in the castle, this meal offers a brief moment of rest, a short pause in the long day of labour. But for the servants, the work is not finished. Even while others eat, they must remain ready. More bread may be needed. More ale may be poured. And after the meal, the tables must once again be cleared and cleaned. Still, for a moment, Thomas stands quietly beside the wall of the great hall. He watches the busy room filled with knights, messengers and workers, all of them eating the food prepared in the hot kitchen. Food made possible by the quiet effort of many servants. Then he picks up an empty jug and walks back toward the kitchen. The afternoon work of the castle will soon begin, and the long day of a medieval servant continues once again. The midday meal slowly comes to an end inside the great hall. Bowls grow empty, and the sound of wooden spoons tapping against clay fades away. Knights stand from the long tables and stretch their arms after eating. Messengers finish their bread quickly before returning to their duties. For a short moment the hall feels calm again, but the servants already know what comes next. Cleaning must begin once more. Thomas walks carefully between the tables, collecting the empty bowls. Some still carry the warmth of the stew inside them. He stacks them gently onto a wooden tray. Around him, several other servants begin wiping the long tables. Small crumbs of bread scatter across the cloth as they brush them away. A young servant sweeps the stone floor with a wide straw broom. The quiet scratching sound moves slowly from one side of the hall to the other. Sunlight now shines strongly through the tall windows. Bright beams stretch across the floor and warm the room. Outside, the castle courtyard is alive with afternoon activity. Thomas carries the heavy tray of bowls back toward the kitchen. The hallway feels cooler again compared to the busy hall. Inside the kitchen, Margaret and the others have already begun washing the dishes. Large wooden tubs are filled with water drawn earlier from the well. The bowls are placed into the water and scrubbed carefully. Thomas sets down the tray and rolls up his sleeves to help. The work is steady but familiar. Wash the bowl, rinse it clean, place it carefully on the drying rack. One after another the dishes are cleaned until the tray is empty. Soon the kitchen grows quiet again. The fires burn lower now that the cooking is finished. Margaret wipes her hands and nods toward the courtyard door. Some laundry still needs attention. Thomas follows her outside into the bright afternoon sun. Beyond the courtyard, near the outer wall, several wooden frames stand in the open air. Long ropes are stretched between them. Wet cloths and garments hang in rows, moving gently in the breeze. Earlier in the day, servants washed these fabrics using water and simple soap. Now the sun and wind finish the work of drying them. Alice stands near one of the ropes, checking the cloths. She removes a dry linen sheet and folds it neatly. Thomas helps by lifting another cloth from the line. The fabric feels warm from the sunlight. Laundry in the medieval world is slow and demanding work. Without machines, every cloth must be cleaned by hand. Water must be carried. Soap must be made. Clothes must be scrubbed again and again. But when the work is finished, the clean linens are a welcome sight inside the castle. Fresh cloths bring comfort to the noble chambers and the dining tables. As they work, the afternoon breeze carries quiet sounds from beyond the castle walls. Somewhere in the distance, a farmer calls to his animals. Birds circle slowly above the fields. The world outside the castle continues its peaceful rhythm. Thomas pauses for a moment and looks across the countryside. Green hills stretch toward the horizon. Small farmhouses sit quietly among the fields. Those farms supply the grain and vegetables that feed the castle. Without the work of farmers, the castle kitchens would stand empty. After folding several cloths, Thomas carries a bundle back toward the storage room inside the castle. The room is cool and dim compared to the bright courtyard. Shelves line the stone walls. Each shelf holds stacks of folded linens ready for use. Alice places the freshly dried cloths neatly beside the others. Everything inside the castle must remain organized. When servants need a cloth or blanket, they must be able to find it quickly. Once the laundry's finished, Thomas steps back into the courtyard again. The afternoon sun now shines high above the castle towers. Shadows stretch along the ground as the day slowly begins to move toward evening. But there are still many tasks waiting. Near the stable, Robert is repairing a broken wooden tool. He sits on a small bench using a knife to smooth the rough edge of the wood. Tools in the medieval world are precious and must be repaired whenever possible. Replacing them is not easy. Thomas walks over and helps hold the wooden handle steady while Robert works. Together they secure the new piece into place. The tool will soon be ready to use again. Moments like this show how the servants depend on each other. Each person has different tasks, but they work together to keep the castle running smoothly. The afternoon continues quietly. Servants move between buildings carrying supplies. A cart filled with firewood enters through the castle gate. The wood will be stacked beside the kitchen for the evening fires. Thomas helps unload several heavy logs. His arms ache slightly from the long hours of work, yet this rhythm of labour is simply part of life for a medieval servant. Morning fires, meals, cleaning, stable work, laundry, and now preparing for the evening. Slowly the golden light of the sun begins to soften. The bright afternoon sky grows warmer in colour. Soon the castle kitchen will need to prepare the evening meal, and once again the servants will gather around the hearth, continuing their quiet work as another day inside the medieval castle slowly moves toward night. As the afternoon slowly fades, the light across the castle courtyard begins to change. The bright sun that once stood high above the towers now moves lower toward the distant hills. Warm golden light spreads across the stone walls and long shadows stretch across the ground. For the servants inside the castle, this gentle change of light signals the beginning of another busy time. Soon the evening meal must be prepared. Thomas carries the last stack of firewood toward the kitchen door. His arms feel tired after the long day of lifting and carrying, yet the work of a servant rarely stops before nightfall. Inside the kitchen, Margaret has already begun preparing the evening fire. She places several thick logs beneath the iron cooking rack. Thomas kneels beside her and uses a small piece of burning wood to start the flames. Soon the fire begins to crackle softly. Warm orange light flickers across the stone walls. The kitchen slowly fills again with the familiar sounds of cooking. Wood popping in the fire, knives tapping gently against cutting boards, pots shifting slightly as they are placed over the flames. Another servant carries a basket filled with onions and cabbage from the storage room. These vegetables will be used to make a simple evening stew. Thomas begins slicing the onions carefully. The sharp smell fills the air as the knife moves steadily across the wooden board. Outside the kitchen window, the sky continues to grow warmer in colour. Soft orange clouds drift slowly above the castle towers. Birds fly across the sky, searching for places to rest before night. Inside the castle, the rhythm of work continues quietly. Margaret pours water into a large iron pot. Soon the sliced vegetables are added along with small pieces of salted meat. The mixture begins to simmer slowly above the fire. Steam rises gently into the air, carrying the comforting smell of the evening meal. Compared to the busy midday cooking, the evening meal often feels calmer. Many knights have already finished their duties for the day. Some sit in the great hall, speaking quietly with friends. Others walk along the castle walls, watching the sunset across the land. Thomas lifts another basket from the table. Inside are thick pieces of dark bread baked earlier that morning. He slices them carefully and places the pieces onto a wooden tray. Bread will once again be served beside the stew. For many people inside the castle, this simple meal is enough after a long day of work. The kitchen grows warm as the fire burns steadily. Servants move slowly around the room, preparing bowls and cups. The long hours of the day begin to show on their tired faces, yet no one complains. This routine is simply the rhythm of life inside the castle. As the stew continues cooking, the light outside fades further. The bright gold sky slowly turns to deep orange and purple. Shadows fill the corners of the courtyard. Torches are lit along the walls by the castle guards. Their flames flicker gently in the evening breeze. Thomas carries the first tray of bowls toward the great hall. The corridor feels quiet compared to the busy kitchen. His footsteps echo softly along the stone floor. When he enters the hall, he sees that several candles have already been lit. Their small flames glow warmly against the tall stone walls. Knights sit along the tables, speaking in low voices. A messenger warms his hands near the great fireplace. The hall feels calm and peaceful after the noise of the daytime hours. Thomas places the tray carefully onto the table. Other servants follow behind him, carrying the pot of stew. Soon the bowls are filled and the evening meal begins. Wooden spoons dip into the warm stew. The smell of onions and herbs spreads gently through the hall. Some people eat quietly while others continue their conversations. For many servants, this is also the first real chance to sit down for a few minutes, though they must remain ready to serve more food or drink if needed. Thomas stands near the wall watching the room. The long day of work is almost finished. Outside, the last light of the sun fades behind the distant hills. The sky darkens slowly above the castle towers. Soon night will fully arrive, and when it does, the servants will finally begin preparing for a few short hours of rest before another long day begins again. Night slowly begins to settle over the castle. The last colours of sunset fade from the sky beyond the tall stone walls. Deep blue darkness spreads across the countryside and the fields grow quiet. Inside the castle courtyard, torches flicker gently along the walls. Their small flames move softly in the cool evening air. The day has been long for everyone inside the castle, but for the servants a few final duties still remain before they can finally rest. Thomas steps out of the great hall carrying another tray of empty bowls. The evening meal is almost finished. Knights push back their benches and stretch after eating. Some remain talking quietly while others prepare to leave the hall. The warm smell of stew still lingers in the air. Candlelight glows across the long wooden tables. Thomas walks slowly between the benches, collecting the last bowls and cups. The work feels familiar now. He has repeated these same tasks many times before. Gather the dishes, carry them to the kitchen, wash them carefully. Prepare everything again for the next morning. When the tray is full, he lifts it carefully and walks back toward the kitchen corridor. The hallway is darker now. A few small torches burn along the stone walls. Their light creates long, moving shadows across the floor. The castle feels different at night. Quieter, slower, almost peaceful after the busy hours of the day. Inside the kitchen, Margaret and 2 other servants are already washing the evening dishes. The fire in the hearth burns lower now. Only a few thick logs glow with steady orange light. Thomas places the tray beside the washing tubs. He joins the others and begins cleaning the bowls one by one. The water in the tub is warm from the nearby fire. Soap made from ash and fat helps remove the last traces of food. Soon the dishes are stacked neatly on the wooden racks to dry overnight. Once the washing is finished, the kitchen slowly begins to quiet down. Margaret wipes the table and stores the remaining bread in a wooden chest. Another servant sweeps the floor, carefully removing crumbs and bits of straw. Nothing is left messy for the morning. Preparing the castle for the next day begins even before the night has fully arrived. Thomas adds one final log to the kitchen fire. The flame grows brighter for a moment. Then it settles again into a steady glow. This fire will burn slowly through the night to keep the kitchen from becoming too cold. After finishing his work, Thomas steps outside into the courtyard once more. The night air feels cool against his face. Above the castle towers, the sky is now filled with stars. Without the bright lights of cities, the medieval night sky is incredibly clear. Hundreds of stars shine quietly above the land. The courtyard is much calmer now. Most of the daytime activity has ended. Only a few guards walk along the walls above. Their armour makes soft metallic sounds as they move. One guard carries a lantern while checking the gates. Security during the night is very important. Castles must always be protected from unexpected visitors. Thomas walks slowly across the courtyard toward the well. He fills one last bucket of water for the kitchen. The rope creaks softly as the bucket is lowered into the darkness. A moment later, the sound of water echoes faintly from below. He pulls the rope back up with steady effort. The heavy bucket reaches the top and he carries it carefully toward the kitchen door. Inside the castle, corridors' candles burn quietly in small holders along the walls. Their gentle light helps guide servants and guards through the halls. Thomas walks through one of the long stone corridors. The rooms that were busy earlier are now silent. Most of the noble residents have already retired to their chambers. Heavy wooden doors remain closed. Behind them, people rest after the long day. At the end of the corridor, a servant finishes lighting the last candle of the night. The small flame flickers for a moment before becoming steady. Soft, golden light fills the corner of the hallway. Thomas nods politely as he passes. Soon, his own work will finally end. He walks down the final staircase toward the lower rooms where the servants sleep. The air grows cooler again as he reaches the stone halls beneath the castle. Here the rooms are simple and quiet. A few other servants have already returned from their duties. Some sit quietly removing their boots. Others prepare their small beds made from straw and blankets. The long day has left everyone tired. Thomas places his tools carefully against the wall. Tomorrow they will be used again. Another morning, another fire to light, another busy day inside the castle. For now the castle grows still. Above them the towers stand silent beneath the stars. Torches flicker gently along the walls, and slowly the sounds of the castle fade into the peaceful quiet of the medieval night. The castle has finally grown quiet. Most of the lights in the upper chambers have already been extinguished. Only a few candles and torches still glow softly along the stone corridors. Outside, the night sky stretches wide and dark above the castle towers. Hundreds of stars shine quietly over the silent countryside. Deep within the castle walls, the servants slowly begin to return to their sleeping quarters. The long day of work has finally come to an end. Thomas walks through the lower corridor beneath the castle. The stone walls here feel cooler than the rooms above. His footsteps echo softly as he passes through the dim hallway. A small lantern hangs near the doorway leading to the servants' room. Its warm light flickers gently against the rough stone walls. Inside the room, several servants are already settling down for the night. Simple straw mattresses line the floor along both sides of the room. Each bed is covered with a thin blanket and sometimes a folded cloak for extra warmth. Compared to the rich chambers above, the servants' quarters are very plain. But after such a long day, even a simple bed can feel welcoming. Thomas steps inside quietly. Robert sits on the edge of his mattress, removing his boots. His shoulders relax as he stretches his tired arms. Working in the stables all day has left dust on his clothes and straw caught in his sleeves. Across the room, Alice folds her cloak and places it beside her bed. The faint smell of hay, wood smoke and soap lingers in the air. These scents are familiar to everyone who works within the castle. They are the smells of long hours and steady labour. Thomas sits down on his own mattress. The straw inside rustles softly as he settles into place. For a moment he stretches his legs and lets out a slow breath. His muscles feel heavy after the many tasks of the day, lighting fires, carrying water, cleaning halls, helping in the stables, serving meals. Every hour has been filled with work. Around him the other servants prepare quietly for sleep. Some speak softly to one another for a few moments. Others simply lie down immediately too tired for conversation. The lantern near the door casts a gentle golden glow across the room. Shadows move slowly along the walls. Outside the thick castle walls, the night remains peaceful. A distant owl calls from somewhere in the dark fields. The sound drifts faintly through a small window near the ceiling. Robert finally lies down on his mattress. He pulls his blanket up around his shoulders. The long day has left him ready for rest. Alice blows out the small candle beside her bed. One by one, the tiny lights in the room disappear. Soon only the lantern near the doorway continues to glow. Thomas leans back against his pillow of folded cloth. For a moment he listens to the quiet sounds around him. The slow breathing of tired workers, the soft rustle of straw beds shifting as people settle into comfortable positions. Above them the massive castle sleeps, the great hall now empty and silent, the kitchen fire burning slowly through the night, guards walking calmly along the walls beneath the stars. The busy world of the day has finally come to rest. Thomas closes his eyes. Tomorrow the same rhythm will begin again. Before sunrise the servants will wake once more. Fires will be lit, water will be carried, meals will be prepared. The endless cycle of work that keeps the castle alive will continue, but for now there is only quiet, the calm stillness of the medieval night. The lantern near the doorway flickers softly for a while longer. Then one final servant rises and gently lowers the flame. The room grows dark, and deep beneath the castle walls the tired servants finally drift into sleep. The castle now rests beneath the quiet sky of the medieval night. High above the tall stone towers the stars shine gently across the dark heavens. The countryside beyond the castle walls lies peaceful and still. Fields stretch quietly into the distance. Small villages sleep beneath the same sky. Inside the castle the busy sounds of the day have completely faded. The great hall stands empty now. Long wooden tables sit quietly in the soft darkness. The large fireplace that warmed the hall earlier burns with only a few glowing embers. A faint orange light flickers gently across the stone floor. In the kitchen, the final fire of the day burns slowly. Thick logs rest deep within the hearth. Their steady heat keeps the room from becoming too cold during the long night hours. Clay bowls sit neatly stacked along wooden shelves. The tables have been wiped clean. Everything is ready for the morning when the servants will once again begin their work. Far above the kitchen, the noble chambers remain silent. Heavy curtains hang across the narrow windows. Candles have been extinguished. Soft blankets and furs cover the beds where the castle's noble residents now sleep. The stone corridors between these rooms are quiet. A single torch burns along the wall, casting a warm golden glow. Its flame moves slowly as a cool breeze drifts through the hallway. From time to time, the soft footsteps of a night guard echo through the corridor. The guards continue their watch even while the rest of the castle sleeps. Their duty is to walk along the walls and towers, making sure the castle remains safe. Outside, the courtyard feels calm beneath the stars. The well stands silent in the centre of the yard. The stable doors remain closed, but inside the horses rest quietly on fresh straw bedding. From time to time, one of them shifts gently or lets out a soft breath. The animals too are enjoying the peaceful quiet of the night. A cool breeze moves slowly across the stone ground. The torches along the walls flicker softly in the darkness. Beyond the castle gates, the countryside stretches wide and silent. A distant owl calls somewhere in the fields. Its quiet voice drifts through the cool air before fading once again into stillness. Deep beneath the castle walls, the servants finally rest in their simple sleeping room. Straw mattresses line the floor. Thin blankets cover tired bodies that worked hard throughout the long day. Their breathing rises and falls slowly in the calm darkness. The rhythm of their rest mirrors the peaceful silence of the castle above them. For these servants, tomorrow will begin early once again. Before the sun rises, fires must be lit. Water must be drawn from the well. Food must be prepared in the kitchen. Floors must be swept. Animals must be cared for. Every day inside the castle follows this same quiet cycle of work and rest. Yet in this moment none of those tasks matter. The castle sleeps. The towers stand tall against the starry sky. The thick stone walls protect everyone inside from the cold night wind. Somewhere in the distance a soft rustle moves through the grass fields beyond the walls. Perhaps a fox wandering quietly through the dark countryside. The world continues its gentle rhythm even while the castle dreams. The final torch along the courtyard wall flickers once more before growing still. The last glowing embers inside the kitchen hearth settle into a faint red glow. All across the castle a peaceful calm has taken hold. and as the stars slowly travel across the silent medieval sky, the entire castle rests, waiting quietly for the first light of another morning to return.